I found her name written in ink I didn't remember using. She held my diary like it was breakable glass. Her eyes stopped exactly on the page about her. "You wrote this about me," she whispered. Stunned. I wanted the sidewalk to swallow me whole. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "I've been waiting for you to notice me too. My name is Maya Bennett, 26. An architect from Portland who believed love followed rules I understood. Until one drop notebook rewired everything I thought I knew about myself. I grew up in a quiet Ohio town where church pews and casseroles defined a good life. And where the word different was never spoken kindly, only whispered. I moved to Portland 3 years ago for a job at Grant & Associates, chasing skylines instead of cornfields, hoping distance would quiet the questions I never let myself ask. The coffee shop on Alder Street became my Tuesday ritual. A corner table, a flat white, and a notebook where I wrote things I never said out loud. I noticed her before she noticed me. A woman with paint-stained fingers who always ordered a courte-à-deux and sketched strangers on napkins she never kept. Her name, I learned from the barista, was Sloan Whitfield, a muralist who'd covered half the breweries in the city with color. We exchanged nods for weeks. Nothing more. Two strangers orbiting the same small room without ever choosing to speak. One rainy Thursday I left my notebook behind, distracted by a phone call from my mother about Sunday dinner plans I dreaded. I didn't realize it was gone until I was 3 blocks away, my stomach dropping like I'd left a limb on that table. When I ran back, Sloan was standing outside holding it, rain soaking through her denim jacket, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't trying to read it," she said quickly, "but the wind opened it, and I saw my own name before I could look away." I froze, waiting for pity or discomfort, the reactions I'd braced for my whole life without ever admitting why. Instead she smiled, small and careful, and asked if I wanted to get actual coffee sometime. Not the kind we drank alone at separate tables. I said yes before my brain caught up with my mouth, and something in my chest loosened for the first time in years. Our first real conversation lasted 4 hours, though it felt like 4 minutes. The kind of talk that erases the need for small talk entirely. She told me she painted because words felt too slow for what she needed to say. And I understood that more than she knew. I told her about Ohio, about casseroles and expectations, editing out the parts that mattered most. The parts written in that damp notebook. She didn't push. Just listen. Tracing the rim of her cup like patience was something she'd practiced on purpose. Over the following weeks, coffee became dinner. And dinner became long walks along the Willamette where neither of us checked the time. I caught myself smiling at my phone during work meetings, waiting for her texts about murals or bad puns about paint colors. My best friend Priya noticed first, teasing that I lit up like a switchboard whenever Sloane's name appeared on my screen. I brushed it off, telling myself this was just friendship, a story I'd repeat until I almost believed it. One evening, painting a mural together at her studio, Sloane admitted something that rearranged the timeline I thought I knew. "I used to come to that coffee shop just to see you," she said, eyes on the wall, not on me. Weeks before the notebook, I stared at her, done, realizing the girl I thought I'd noticed first had actually been watching me all along. That confession cracked something open in me, a door I'd kept shut since high school, when I'd loved a girl named Kayla in silence. I told Sloane about Kayla that night, the first time I'd said the word gay out loud about myself to another living person. She didn't flinch, didn't make it a moment bigger than it needed to be, just squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me." I cried in my car afterward, not from sadness, but from the strange relief of being known without being punished for it. Priya became my anchor during those months, the one person who already knew, who'd guessed years before I found the courage to say it. She told me love wasn't a confession you owed anyone except yourself, and I clung to that sentence like a life raft. Sloane and I started spending nights on my fire escape, sharing takeout and silences that felt fuller than most people's conversations. The first time she kissed me, it was quick and startled, Like she'd surprised herself more than she'd surprised me. I didn't pull away. And that non-reaction told her everything my mouth was still too scared to say. We became something unnamed but understood. Careful with labels. Cautious with witnesses. Private in a way that felt both safe and suffocating. At work, I kept Sloane folded into vague pronouns. A friend. Someone I've been seeing. Phrases that protected me and erased her simultaneously. She never complained. But I saw the flicker of hurt whenever I introduced her that way to coworkers at happy hour. One night she asked gently, "Are you ashamed of me? Or ashamed of what people will think of you?" I didn't have an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. So I just held her tighter and said nothing. My mother called every Sunday. Always circling back to Ethan Cole. Our neighbor's son. Such a nice boy. Still single. Still asking about you. I deflected with excuses about deadlines. Letting silence do the lying my voice refused to do out loud. Sloane never asked me to choose between her and my family, which somehow made the guilt heavier, not lighter. We celebrated 6 months with a road trip to the coast. Cliffs and fog in a rented cabin that smelled like cedar and salt. There, wrapped in blankets. She told me about her sister Nora, the only person in her family who still called on holidays. Her parents, she said, hadn't spoken to her since she was 20, the year she brought a girlfriend home for Christmas. I asked if it still hurt, and she said grief doesn't disappear. It just learns to sit quietly in the back seat. That night I understood the weight she carried, and for the first time, I feared what my own family might cost me. Back in Portland, I started noticing Sloane pulling back slightly whenever conversations turned toward the future, toward permanence, toward us. I assumed it was fear of my hesitation, not realizing there was a deeper wound she hadn't shown me yet. We met her friend Rosa for drinks one night, and Rosa slipped, mentioning Jess before catching herself and changing the subject fast. Later, alone, I asked Sloane gently who Jess was, and her face changed in a way I'd never seen before. Jess was my fiancée, she said quietly. She died in a car accident 2 years ago, 3 months before our wedding. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, and I finally understood the caution behind every one of her smiles. I stopped believing love was safe, she admitted. Then you dropped a notebook, and I couldn't stop reading it. I held her that night without trying to fix anything, learning that some pain only needs company, not solutions. Knowing about Jess changed how I loved her. Softer. Steadier. Aware that trust with Sloane was a gift, not a given. I started imagining a future out loud for the first time. Small things. Apartments. Dog. Sunday mornings that belonged to us. Sloane listened to these daydreams with a guarded hope, like someone learning to breathe again after years underwater. My work performance improved strangely, as if happiness had cleared static I hadn't realized was clouding my focus. My boss, Mr. Grant, praised a project I designed with Sloane's color instincts quietly woven through every render. I hadn't told him why the design suddenly felt alive, but privately, I knew exactly whose eyes had shaped them. For the first time in my adult life, I felt fully like myself, unedited, unafraid. At least within these 4 walls. That comfort didn't survive contact with the outside world for long, because comfort rarely does when secrets share a city this small. A coworker named Diane Marsh had seen Sloane and me holding hands outside a restaurant near the office one evening. Diane was ambitious, competitive for the same promotion I wanted, and she filed that information away like a weapon for later. I didn't know yet that she had, so I kept moving through my double life, unaware the walls were already thinning. My mother's calls grew more insistent about Ethan, mentioning he'd asked about me at church, that he still carried a torch. I finally told her I wasn't interested in Ethan, that I was seeing someone, deliberately vague about pronouns and details. Someone from work? she pressed. And I said no. Just someone special. Letting her fill in blanks I wasn't ready to color. Sloane suggested, gently, that maybe it was time to tell my parents the truth before someone else did it for me. I panicked at the idea, insisting I needed the right moment. A myth I'd been chasing for over a decade. There's no perfect moment, she said. Trust me. I learned that the hard way. Twice now. Her words stung because they were true. But truth rarely arrives gently when you're not ready to hold it. One Friday, Diane cornered me by the printer and asked, too casually, if the woman from the restaurant was my girlfriend. My stomach dropped, but I stayed composed, saying only that my personal life wasn't office conversation, and walked away. She smiled in a way that made my skin crawl, the smile of someone who just confirmed a suspicion she planned to use. That weekend, my mother called sounding strange, distant, asking if there was something I needed to tell her. My heart pounded as I asked what she meant, terrified the answer would confirm my worst imagination. Someone from your work reached out to your cousin on social media, she said. Said things about you and a woman. The betrayal landed like a physical blow. Diane had found my cousin online and planted the truth like a bomb. I didn't deny it this time, too exhausted to keep building walls that kept collapsing under other people's hands. Yes. Mom. Her name is Sloane. I love her. The words felt foreign and true at the exact same moment. Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped, until my mother finally said, I need time, and hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for an hour, phone in hand, waiting for a call back that didn't come that night. Sloane found me there when she arrived for dinner, and instead of panicking, she simply sat beside me on the tile. This is the part nobody warns you about, she said softly. The waiting is almost worse than the rejection. Monday at work. Whispers followed me through the halls. Diane's version of events traveling faster than truth ever could. Mr. Grant called me into his office, not to reprimand me, but to say my personal life was irrelevant to my talent. Though, I felt exposed, like a building with its scaffolding stripped away before construction was ready for public view. My father called that week, voice tight, asking if this was a phase brought on by living too long in Portland. I told him it wasn't a phase, that I'd known since I was 16 and simply hadn't found the courage until now. He said he needed time too, echoing my mother's words like a script neither of them had chosen willingly. Sloane watched me absorb these conversations, and I noticed her retreating slightly, as if my pain reminded her too much of Jess. I can't watch someone I love lose their family because of me, she said one night, voice cracking at the edges. I told her I wasn't losing anyone, just recalibrating. But even I heard how thin that reassurance sounded aloud. My grandmother Eleanor, 81 and sharper than anyone gave her credit for, called unexpectedly, asking to hear about Sloane herself. I told her everything, bracing for disappointment, but she just listened, humming softly like she was solving a puzzle. Bring her to Thanksgiving, Eleanor said simply. Family doesn't get to choose who deserves love, only who shows up for it. Her support surprised me so completely that I cried again, this time from something closer to hope than fear. Meanwhile, an opportunity arose that would test everything. Sloane was offered a lead mural position for a gallery chain based in Seattle. It was the career leap she'd dreamed about for years, the kind of offer that doesn't repeat itself twice. She didn't tell me right away, and I felt the distance before I understood its cause. A silence shaped like retreat. I found the acceptance email open on her laptop by accident. Dated. Already drafted. Waiting only for her signature. Were you going to tell me? I asked. Or just disappear once it was done? The way grief taught you to. She didn't deny it. Just admitted she was scared that loving me fully meant risking losing everything all over again. Leaving quietly felt safer than losing you slowly, she said, tears finally breaking through her careful composure. I told her running wasn't protection. It was just a different kind of loss. One she was choosing instead of surviving. We didn't resolve it that night. Just sat in the wreckage of honesty, unsure which pieces were still worth keeping. The following days felt like walking through fog. Both of us circling the same conversation without landing anywhere solid. Diane, emboldened by the office gossip, escalated further, forwarding a screenshot of Sloane's mural page to half our department. The caption implied things about unprofessional relationships, an accusation with no real weight but plenty of cruelty behind it. I confronted Diane directly this time, voice steady, telling her my life was not currency for her career ambitions. She didn't apologize, just shrugged and said, "I was just curious, a lie thin enough to see straight through. Mr. Grant." Hearing the full story from a colleague, quietly moved Diane off my project and issued a formal warning. It wasn't justice exactly, but it was enough to make the office feel survivable again, if not entirely safe. At home, Sloane grew quieter. Packing boxes she claimed were just decluttering, though I recognized rehearsal for departure. I begged her not to make this decision out of fear, but my pleading only seemed to confirm her fears further. "You're proof that love doesn't stay," she said one night. Jess didn't leave because she wanted to, and maybe I don't either. Her comparison stung, but I understood it wasn't really about me. It was about a wound that never fully closed. My mother called again that week, voice softer this time, asking cautious questions about Sloane's job and her family. I answered honestly, surprised by the small thaw in her tone. A crack of light through a door I thought sealed. "Your grandmother's been talking to me," she admitted. "She said something I didn't expect to hear from her." I asked what, and my mother hesitated before saying, "That she understands more about this than any of us realized." That comment planted a question in me I hadn't thought to ask before. One I promised myself I'd raise at Thanksgiving. Sloane's departure date crept closer, and the space between us grew heavier with unsaid things neither of us voiced. Priya urged me to fight harder. Not with anger, but with honesty about what I actually wanted from this love. "Tell her you're scared too," she said, "instead of just being brave for both of you all the time." I found Sloane at her studio one evening, surrounded by half-finished canvases, paint drying on brushes she'd abandoned mid-stroke. "I'm scared too," I told her. "Scared of my family. Scared of losing you. Scared of choosing wrong either way." She turned, brush still in hand, and for the first time in weeks, really looked at me instead of past me. "Then why do you make it look so easy?" she asked, voice raw, exposing a vulnerability she rarely lets surface. "Because loving you is the only part that's easy," I said. "Everything else is just noise I'm learning to survive." She set the brush down slowly, walked over, and pressed her forehead to mine without saying anything else for a while. "I haven't accepted the Seattle offer yet," she finally admitted. "I keep finding reasons to leave the email unanswered." I told her I wouldn't ask her to give up her dream, but I needed her to stop deciding my future without me. We agreed, tentatively, to talk it through properly instead of retreating into silence or unilateral decisions born from fear. Thanksgiving arrived faster than I was ready for. My childhood home decorated in the same amber tones as every year before. Sloane came with me this time, nervous energy masked behind a bottle of wine and a carefully chosen sweater. My father greeted her stiffly, polite but distant, while my mother hovered somewhere between welcoming and overwhelmed. Ethan Cole showed up uninvited, apparently still hopeful, and the tension in the room thickened instantly at his arrival. My grandmother Eleanor, however, greeted Sloane warmly, taking her hand and saying, "Finally, someone who makes my granddaughter glow." Dinner started tensely, silverware clinking louder than conversation, everyone performing normalcy over a table full of unspoken things. Ethan, oblivious or deliberately provoking, asked loudly when I planned to settle down properly, glancing pointedly at Sloane. Before I could respond, My grandmother set down her fork and said, "She has settled down properly. Ethan."
Paie attention.
The table went silent. Forks paused mid-air. All eyes shifting toward Eleanor as she continued speaking without hesitation. "I loved a woman once," she said calmly. "Her name was Ruth. 1959. I never told anyone until now." The room froze completely. My mother's fork clattering onto her plate. My father's mouth opening without any words following. "I married your grandfather because it was safer," Eleanor continued. "I loved him too. Eventually. But I never forgot Ruth." She looked directly at me. "Don't choose safety over truth, Maya." I had 60 years to regret that choice. Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. Decades of silence suddenly explaining her quiet strength differently. My mother excused herself from the table. And for a moment I feared the worst kind of exit. She returned minutes later holding an old photograph. Black and white. Two young women laughing on a porch swing. "I found this years ago in Grandma's things," my mother said. "I never understood it until just now." The photograph passed hands slowly around the table, landing finally in Sloane's, who studied it with quiet reverence. "She looks happy," Sloane said softly, handing it to me. Like someone who knew exactly who she was. My mother sat back down, visibly shaken, and finally looked at me with something closer to recognition than judgment. "I don't fully understand this, Maya," she admitted. "But I don't want to lose you over something I refuse to try understanding." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a door left open, wider than any I'd seen from her before. My father remained quiet through most of it, but later, in the kitchen, he touched my shoulder briefly and said, "Be happy." 2 words. Simple and imperfect, but from him they carried the weight of an entire unfinished conversation. Ethan left early, embarrassed, muttering something about not knowing, which felt less like malice and more like ignorance finally confronted. That night, driving home, Sloane held my hand the entire way, silent, processing everything that had unfolded at that table. "Your grandmother just changed both our lives," she said eventually. "I don't think I've ever seen courage look so ordinary." I told her I understood now why loving out loud mattered. Even when it terrified me. Even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. The following week, Sloane finally opened her laptop and, without hesitation this time, declined the Seattle position entirely. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "Not from grief. Not from love. Not from you." I asked if she was sure. Worried she'd resent the sacrifice someday. Worried history would repeat itself through regret. "This isn't a sacrifice," she said. "It's a choice. There's a difference. And I finally understand it." We spent the following weeks rebuilding what fear had almost dismantled. Slower this time. Steadier. Less afraid of permanence. My mother started texting occasionally. Small questions about Sloane's murals. Tentative bridges built one careful message at a time. Then, humiliated by Mr. Grant's warning. Eventually transferred to another branch. And the office tension finally began to dissolve. I was offered the promotion I'd been chasing. Not despite my honesty, but seemingly unaffected by it entirely. Sloane's mural work grew locally instead. A citywide project celebrating hidden histories, inspired quietly by my grandmother's story. She asked Eleanor for permission to include a small tribute to Ruth, hidden within a larger piece downtown. Eleanor agreed, tears in her eyes, saying, "Let her live in color now," since she couldn't live loudly then. The mural unveiling drew a small crowd, including my parents, standing awkwardly but present, which felt like its own quiet miracle. My mother studied the tribute to Ruth longest, fingers brushing the wall gently, as if touching history itself. "Your grandmother deserved better," she murmured. "So do you." "I'm sorry it took me this long to say that." I hugged her then. The first real hug we'd shared since I'd told her the truth months earlier. Sloane watched from a distance, giving us space, understanding better than anyone what that moment actually cost my mother. That evening, we walked the mural district alone, streetlights flickering on as autumn settled over the city. Move in with me, I said suddenly, surprising even myself with how naturally the words arrived this time. She laughed, startled, then nodded, eyes glassy. I was going to ask you the exact same thing tonight. We signed the lease on a small apartment near her studio, painting the walls together over a slow, unhurried weekend. My mother helped choose curtains, an ordinary act that felt extraordinary given everything it took to arrive here. My grandmother visited often, calling it her second chance at watching love live the way it was meant to. Priya joked that our apartment finally looked like us. Chaotic, colorful, unapologetically full of unfinished, honest things. I still keep that original notebook, the one Sloane found on a rainy sidewalk years ago, tucked safely on our shelf. Sometimes I reread that first entry about her, amazed at how one accidental confession rewrote my entire definition of home. Then, ironically, became a quiet catalyst, her cruelty accelerating truths that might have taken years to surface otherwise. Though gone, remained part of Sloane's story too. A love that taught her grief and courage both mattered. I used to believe love had to follow rules I understood. Careful, hidden, safe from judgment and unwanted attention. I know now that real love is louder than fear. And mine finally found its voice, standing beside Sloane. Fendi.